And a very good evening to you, and welcome to Politics 101. I'm David Hines on a Tuesday evening. Tonight, we are going to continue the discussion we started last week on the recently released opinion poll by the International Republican Institute, the IRI. Last week, we spent some time combing through some of the findings, and we want to continue to do that this evening. It is important that when these issues come to the fore, that we have a discussion about them. I notice that the government, through the minister or the advisor, Ms. Gail Teixeira, rubbished the poll. Now, what I find quite interesting with that, this was the party that told us that the IRI was going to spearhead our electoral reform process. The IRI later on debunked that and said they were not in Guyana to spearhead the electoral reform process, that they were going to assist if asked in giving expertise, technical expertise. It was the opposition parties and other independent voices in the society who said no. The IRI cannot and ought not to be spearheading electoral reform in Guyana. Now, the IRI, as they commissioned this poll and they are sharing with us the results of the poll, and apparently there are things in the poll which the government doesn't like, or the poll apparently doesn't show the government in good light, or the PPP in good light, and they're now distancing themselves from the poll. It's one of the reasons why people have such a low opinion about political leaders and political parties, and because of the inconsistency, the hypocrisy. Now, here are people that you were touting just the other day, and now they did an opinion poll, and there's some findings in the poll that you don't like, and you rubbish it. I'm sure behind the scenes, the PPP is taking the poll very seriously, taking the findings very seriously, but in the public domain, they're rubbishing it. There are things in there I can understand that the PPP doesn't like, when only 28% of the PPP's ethnic constituency, meaning only 28% of Indian Guyanese, have confidence in the electoral system. That is bound to be somewhat troubling for the PPP. Because if I were the PPP, you would then be wondering, what does this mean? Does it mean that they may be lower than normal turnout among Indian Guyanese? We know that those figures are not going to translate into people not voting for the PPP, Indian Guyanese not voting for the PPP, or African Guyanese not voting for the PNC/coalition. But of course, what it does reveal, as we would be discussing later on, is perhaps the alienation of all Guyanese, including Indian Guyanese. Now, we know anecdotally that people tend to be much more enthusiastic when they're ethnic group. or the ethnic party, sorry, is in office. But when only 28% of your people are showing enthusiasm for the electoral process, and this in the context of the propaganda that the other side rigged the elections, which means that one expect that the supporters of the coalition to say, look, we lost, and so we don't have any confidence in the process. But when the group that supports the party that quote unquote won the election is saying we don't have confidence in the system, then you know it speaks of a certain kind of alienation, and maybe that is what the PPP is concerned about. But it is that kind of inconsistency, that kind of opportunism that I think turns people off from politics. And, you know, given the ethno-racial stakes, people of course participate, they vote, and they vote for these parties, despite their understanding that they're being caught by these parties. But it was quite surprising to hear the PPP talk about not having confidence in the poll. Of course, no poll is perfect. I mean, there are flaws. I am sure there are flaws in the poll. There are some questions there that I don't necessarily think are relevant. There are some questions there that doesn't tell you much. Yes, there are flaws in all opinion polls, but to dismiss it because it doesn't say very much that you would like them to hear, really, you would like to hear, really, is beyond the pale. But it's politics. Welcome to Politics 101. Please share the link. Please share the link and let everyone know that we are here tonight, and we are going to continue that discussion of the opinion poll that was released by the International Republican Institute. Ali Majid, a WP executive member, is saying here, Mr. Shearer attended the IRI stakeholders meeting representing the government, in which capacity she was given a 15 minutes time slot. Mr. Mustafa also attended representing the PPP. And that's important information. I know last week, Dr. Jeffrey had said he had heard from some of the political types, and they had given the impression that they weren't part of the process, you know. And I did say that I know the WPA, and Mr. Majid was one of our representatives. He led our delegation that was at the stakeholders meeting. And he's saying here, Tashera was at the stakeholders meeting. She spoke for 15 minutes. Mustafa was there. So they were part of the stakeholders meeting that discussed the poll and have contributed to some of the questions and the perspectives that went into the poll. But here now the findings may not be in their favor, and they're giving the public the impression that they had nothing to do with it. These people were the biggest cheerleaders of the IRI when they said that the IRI was here to spearhead the thing. And I remember being part of the WPA delegation that had the initial meeting with the IRI, and the IRI told us that they were not here to spearhead the meeting, the electoral process. They didn't bother to answer the government publicly, but that was the first question we posed to them, because all of us were concerned about that, not only the WPA. And they made it clear that they were not here to do that. And they proceeded to say that one of the first things they wanted to do was this poll, and they were going to engage the stakeholders. But the PPP doesn't like what apparently what they've seen here. Welcome again to Politics 101, wherever you're joining us from, whether you're joining us from here in Guyana or you're joining in from the rest of the Guyanese diaspora in the Caribbean, North America, Europe, South America, wherever you are, welcome to Politics 101. Did some of you read an editorial, I think it was 2 or 3 days ago, by the Kaito News, not Kaito News, Stabrook News. Stabrook News, to me, they are very good editorials. Over the years, it's one of the things that certainly I would first read when I open the Stabrook News, the editorials. Did an editorial on the leader of the opposition, or the opposition as they called it, scathing on Aubrey Norton. Really, I find it very troubling. You know, he's saying he doesn't have experience, basically giving him low marks as an opposition leader. And their whole position is that they have a view of what the opposition in Guyana should be. And based on that view of what the opposition should be, they don't feel that Aubrey Norton fits that position. The reason I draw attention to it is that I've always been uncomfortable with people who behave as though Guyana is a normal normal Anglo-Saxon country, a normal society where we are an ethnic monolith, we're a political monolith, and there's a certain role of the opposition in those kinds of society. There's a role for the opposition in England and places. And they lift that and bring it to Guyana and discuss this position in Guyana as if they're talking about England. Guyana, as we have said over and over on this program, Guyana is a plural society that is one of the most ethnically divided in the world. And that if you're talking about government, you're talking about opposition, whatever you're talking about in Guyana, whatever you're talking about, I'm getting some feedback, Mr. Operator. Mr. Operator, I'm getting some feedback. Whatever you are talking about in Guyana, whether it's government or opposition, you can't talk as though we are living in England or somewhere like that. In societies like these, the opposition play a different role. If you are living in a society in which it's a winner-take-all system, and the government wins and the government takes all, in a divided society, in which the government takes up all the political space and leaves none for the opposition, why do you expect the opposition must be this quote-unquote responsible opposition? A responsible opposition assumes a responsible government. If you don't have a responsible government, why are you talking about a responsible opposition? That kind of dishonesty on the part of people like the Stabrook News riles me up because they know better. They know better. But it's a way of, I don't think they intend to put down Aubrey Norton. I think they're more enlightened than that. But it comes over that way. Yet that he must be a good Afro-Saxon, right? He must be a good opposition leader, loyal opposition. And I don't have a problem with the loyal opposition. But a loyal opposition assumes a responsible government. You see? Anyhow, that is discussion for another day. I just thought I just get that off my chest, that these people could be very disrespectful sometimes. Norton is not a lawyer, doctor type, and so on. He doesn't originate from the traditional middle class. And they ought to be very careful about when they write these things, because working people, poor people are going to take it a certain way, and quite rightly. Anyhow, Politics 101. Tonight, we're going to continue our discussion on the IRI poll. Some of those findings, we're going to talk about them. We'll bring back the same team, or we are bringing back the same team from last week. Dr. Henry Jeffrey, regular. Mr. Gabriel Lal, GHK Lal, regular, and Mr. Adam Harris, who's going to join us shortly. Gentlemen, good evening.
Good evening.
And welcome again to Politics 101. What do you all make of Mr. Shearer's distancing herself from the poll, or worse yet, dismissing the poll as not being the most important thing in the world, and so on? I'll start with you, Mr. Lal.
Well, the first thing that came to my mind is damage control. If it's not for me, then I've got to go out there and plaster it. I've got to lambaste it. And this is exactly what has happened. When it's for me, I'm all cheers. And it's you call it inconsistency, you call it hypocrisy, and I think those words are pretty mild. I think it's the utter ugliness to which we have deteriorated in this country, that we can't, even if the poll is flawed, and it certainly has its limitations, it has its utilities, it has its benefits, it has its positives. It gives us a mirror unto ourselves, and we should welcome what it is saying and tell ourselves, how are we going to look into this to see where we can improve? The intention, the objective must be always how we can bring about change first within ourselves, so we can have a change in society, a better society. So it's not unexpected at all that the PPP, through its spokesperson, and in this case, she's pretty good at this. It's characteristic of her that she would react in the way that she has, and it's sort of retaliatory from what I can see. You rubbish it, you dismiss it, you disdain it, and you're sending a message to your people. Don't pay attention to these people. If they were to say something good, then by all means pay attention to them. So it's this seesaw, this lack of standing for something, and as you said, that was touted before. Take a stand, draw a line, and say, well, you know what? It's got some things. We are learning some things. We don't agree with everything. Are we going to do something about that? That's my point.
Henry Jeffrey?
Well, obviously, I think Ali made the point just now that Gail was the point person there. And this poll now upturned the baby party. Now she's going to be blamed for this. She's going to be blamed for this. She's the first one got to come out and make a big song and dance that is nonsense and all this, because it depends very much when she went back what she would have said. You see, when you go to these things, you got to make sure people are asking the right questions, that the poll would have the right questions and that kind of a thing. Now, it appears, well, it's not appears, it's there. The poll has hit levels of reality that the PPP is just not in. The PPP wants to dominate Guyanese politics. The polls are more or less. As a result of which, you have people disillusioned with politics in Guyana. Young people don't believe there is any place for them here and all of that. And now that is what the polls have shown. So the question becomes, how are you going to deal with this in the context where one party wants to dominate the political space? Is as simple as that. You see, you talk about the editorial and that. I said, the mainstream press editorial do not, I wrote this numerous times, so this is not now, do not want you to touch the question of who rules. They do not want you to get close to it. Who rules? Once the PPP rule, it's fine. They want you to talk about corruption. Well, you see where your corruption was on the list of concerns. Nobody is voting for you because you're inefficient or corrupt. This is Guyana. This is the nature of the situation. It's ethnic voting. And the result is that they would love you to talk about that all day. You can talk about that as much as you like and course up the PPP all day about how it's corrupt, how it's stealing, and nobody don't lose, not gonna lose. They're not gonna lose much sleep. But the minute you start saying, "Let's go on the street," we need to protest, we need to make a great shake about what's going on. How come you must, with a one-seat majority, spending all of our resources? No party, PNC or PB with a one-seat majority should be in this position to be spending all of its resources and giving the very nature of the political system mean you got to spend more on your own people because you want to vote the next time. And that's precisely what's happening in various ways. So you cannot, that is the context of Ghana. The PPP is set upon political dominance on Guyana. And if that is the road, and that is the road they have taken off on, this here shows the result of that. Political dominance, political disillusionment. We have no faith in the political system, that's it. But they want to continue this and perhaps even make it more radical as you go along the road. They think that what they can do, incorporate a few Africans in the party and so on, and keep the leadership to themselves and so on. They do it all over the place. Israel, wherever. That is it. That's it. You know, you can keep the Palestinians down. You can create what now they call an ethnic democracy. And the other lot will just roll with you. It's not going to happen. So I am not at all surprised. Were you surprised that you didn't see anything about this poll in the mainstream media? Well, so what we talking about here? It's talking about this thing affecting who rules and the nature of the political system. It's saying it's crap, it's broken. It is saying the political system is broken. They don't want to hear that. And that is what the Carter Center been saying, the US aid report saying this system is broken. You got to fix this system. And as I finished my little, I said in my little article this week in Village Wide, that this electoral reform is a reform, go on, but you'll be disappointed because this fixing the electoral system in a fashion that will help Guyana requires that you fix the political system. And if you don't, you can go down any road fixing the electoral system. And it's going to be difficult, and it would not serve any great purpose. Until you fix the winner-takes-all system in this country, you are going absolutely nowhere in making this country into a nation.
GHK, Dr. Jeffrey saying there that this poll, in a sense, goes against this kind of progress and optimism and so on that the PPP would have us believe, and that's one of their big grouses with the findings of the poll. What says thou?
Look, when you go through the polls, and this week, from the last time we spoke, we shared to today. So I went through the polls, the entire thing, 123 pages, and it tells you, it forced people, or it put some pressure on people to come up with an answer. Sure, it boxes them in. But when you look at this, even with margins for error and statistical flaws that we know exist in these things, when you look at very dissatisfied, somewhat dissatisfied, or disappointment, or a disagree, or whatever it was, when you bulk those numbers up, you're almost always upwards of 60%. And I'm not counting so much the indigenous, and excuse me for that. I'm looking at Afro-Guyanese and Indo-Guyanese. And they're saying 36 of this and 22 of that, and those combinations. And what this is saying is that, hey, 3 out of 5 Guyanese, sometimes 4 out of 5 Guyanese, across the 2 major ethnicities, have a problem with things in this place. They are thinking. They look at what is going on and they do not agree with it, with the optimism, call it propaganda, with the parade of good news and of temporary band-aids, when we are looking for long-term fixes, when we are looking for bigger fixes, when we are looking for things that will make us feel proud to be Guyanese. We have a system of elections, we have a system of voting, we have a mentality where, regardless of what happens with corruption, regardless of what happens with oil, regardless what happens with GCOM itself, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to vote the way my grandfather and great grandfather used to vote. And that's the end of the story. We've heard about the younger vote and the swing vote. I think they're all imaginary, and the youth vote and the educated vote. Where are our thinkers in this country? Yeah. So they have thought through, or at least they have looked at the questions, and somehow people are saying to themselves at the individual and collective levels, if I may, the community and tribal levels, and say, this darn thing is not adding up. And I disagree with this, and I must register that. And despite all the happy talk and the good cheer, and people will not allow themselves, their thought processes, to be subverted, or they will willingly surrender that. And that is what this poll is showing. You can tell me about optimism and progress and development and all these big ticket projects as long as you like. But unless it translates to a state of mind and a peace of mind and the kind of mind where I can exist in this country with a certain kind of ambiance, then I really don't, I'm disenchanted with it. I'm disillusioned with it. I'm dissatisfied with it. And that's the grassroots people across regions, across age groups, across ethnicities speaking. That's not me as a migrant speaking. That's not me as somebody, a recluse, or somebody who's reserved. That's just the man in the street pouring out his heart that what we have here, I don't agree with, and I don't like, and I don't want it. And that there is a problem for the rulers of this land today.
Thank you very much. And in case you're just joining us, it's In Politics. What we're discussing tonight, we are continuing our discussion tonight on the findings of the IRI opinion poll. Let's get into some of the big issues. Now, you all remember that registration, the voters list, has been a big deal. It continues to be a big deal. Whether in fact we're going to have a new voters list, or is it that we are going to get this thing right? We heard about the bloated voters list. So registration is a big issue. Now, here is this question. How satisfied or dissatisfied are you with the registration process? 31% says very satisfied. The rest are either somewhat satisfied, somewhat dissatisfied, very dissatisfied. So you're saying here, 3 out of 10 people polled are saying we are satisfied with the registration process. 7 out of 10 are saying we are not satisfied with this registration process. Henry Jeffrey, what that tells us?
What do you mean what it tells us? If the European Union after the election even supported the PVP to do, to come to government, says here, you gotta have a new elections, a new electoral list. The CARICOM, recount people, they said at the minimum, before you go to a new election, you must have a new electoral list. Yet we are going on like this. This thing doesn't matter. Everybody knows that the numbers in the country, the list is too large. It has been said 10 times. I've said it. Everybody has said it. The result is you are opening the door for people to do all sorts of irregularities. People a fella in Trinidad in Barbados during the last election could write and say, "But I left Region 1 since I was a child. How come my name is on this list to vote?" I mean, that is what goes on. People can add names and all this sort of a thing. You need biometrics. You need a new broad house-to-house list before you go to any election. I've said that too many times.
Yes, go ahead.
But I'm saying to you that this can be a fight because the people never want it. They don't want it. And therefore, here is where Mr. Norton would have to show his strengths. Because remember, when when they said you had to have, when the PNC was going along with the house to house during the 2020 electoral process, what Mr. Jagdeo say? He don't want it. It's not going to happen. He's going to protest in the sense that he would not be part of the electoral process. Mr. Norton now he says he's the man mobilizer. Well, this is a fundamental issue here. He's got to mobilize. PPP won't want it. He's going to have to make a decision, a big, huge decision here. Are you going to go election with the same list? Or are you going to boycott the election? What are you going to do about this list? You have the European Union say it must have a new list. You have CARICOM saying you must have a new, and they're the ones that put the PPP in government in a sense. So effectively, they're saying you must have a new list at a minimum according to CARICOM. And now the PPP said they don't want this minimum, that effectively they have this registration process, continuous is good. When they're scared to go to election, to look in the ballot boxes to see the irregularities that was shown up there, where are those irregularities where you came from? Where are these people that vote abroad that the police said vote about it, immigration said I was not here? They don't want. They said during the election, listen, you have a petition, go to the petition. Okay. Those who want to buy that bought it. So they put the government in office that have every reason to stymie the petition to carry you to a petition. Well, you got what you deserve to get. The government in office, it does everything in the world for you. Don't touch those numbers, low and feel put down there and so on. You see, they're trying to lock up low and feel rather than go and show directly to the people of Guyana that all of these things were bad, it's wrong. That if it was the PVP and I was above board, I would have gone and shown that it is wrong, because the PVP, perhaps for the first time in its history, it's like boredom, and the fellas, the people who are voting in the train line in London, remember?
Yeah.
People who are voting there, and people said, ITV said, look, people are voting, nobody lives here. On that day, and really the PNC would still walk around. People, oh yeah, the election was free and fair. But from that day, what turned up at the last election, the PPP is having now the Borna moment. And you see all those people are saying they're not sorry, they're not there. No, yeah. People would say, if you ask them personally, in terms of, they'll say, oh no, PPP and all that. But they know, just like the Africans knew that what was going on, these people know what was going on. That's why when sensible people go to them and ask them these questions, they have to, they feel they're not stupid. They know that it might lead to another question if you don't answer sensibly. So that is the result you have. And that's why the PPP don't want this thing.
Yes, yeah. People say registration, they don't have any confidence in it. The people apparently saying they have confidence in it. They have cross purposes here with their own supporters, it seems. Your audio
Yes,
is not.
I'm sorry. 7 out of 10 individuals polled across the board are saying in Creolese, this thing wrong. This thing, that speaks for itself. We're not talking about half and half or a slight edge. 7 out of 10 is saying that this process, this list, this process, this thing is wrong. And I think in 2019, 2020, this should have been a showstopper. And looking ahead to 2 years from now, 3 years from now, this has to be a drop dead issue. I'm using some Americanisms here, so excuse me. It has to be a drop. This thing has to be resolved, right? And it has to be resolved by the time we get to the next election season. Now, I heard that Dr. Jeffrey just said that the PPP is having a Burnham moment, and he's referring to something. I think we have to go past that. The PPP is having a Burnham era. It's reliving the Burnham age in its own inimitable way, but to an even more, a greater degree of intensity and on a more expansive scale.
Yeah,
Whether you
yeah.
agree with me or not, that's where I am. And when we look at the registration list, migrants, people who living overseas, and people who dead, and all those things. And I heard about ID cards, machine, etc. But let's put all of that aside. The sentiments from the ground up, the feelings from the ground up, their minds are telling them, our thinking is telling us that, hey, this thing is not just wrong, it's really wrong. It's really lopsided. It's really offside. And we cannot proceed further with with a list, with a set of circumstances that are predicated on this list. We're talking about winner takes all, and dependent upon what, contingent upon what, upon something that all of us sit back afterwards, Monday morning quarterback, and say, hey, what was I just a part of? What was I just a part of? Well, I was a part of a fraud. I was part of a situation that I contributed to, and I say that I am a reasonable man. I'm a ethical person. I am a sensible. No, it's like me go and you, any one of us, and any one of our listeners going into an exam or into a process, and it's crooked. It's crooked from the start. We know that. The invigilators know that. The participants know that. And we still willingly go along into it. And now we are crying these tears, which I think are really crocodile tears. Let me say this. The list has to be fixed. That is a major issue. And obviously, Freedom House is unhappy that it has surfaced from its own IRI people that it was favoring before. And now, this is something they don't want to hear. They don't want to hear. So if that alone, your basis for being in power is suspect. And therefore, it's got to be not change, it's not going to be reform, it's got to be massively overhauled. That is what I heard there. 7 out of 10, that's a lot of persuasion to do. That's a lot of convincing waiting to happen. And it can only happen if we have a process that is credible, that is trustworthy.
It can only happen if it's credible and trustworthy. I remember the CARICOM people who came here said that GCOM, they do not feel that GCOM has the capacity to conduct and supervise a public election. Yet they certified um, an election that GCOM supervised. Here, the poll is asking this question here. Um, do you feel, how confident, if at all, are you in the GCOM's ability to organize and supervise elections? Only 19% of the people say they are confident. 81% say they are not confident. Again, more evidence of people's lack of confidence in the process. Henry Jeffrey?
We got, look at the struggle you had to get a chairman for GCOM. I mean, what it tells you there, that the formula is a bit problematic. It's like the quarrel over the chief justice and the chancellor. The constitution say you gotta agree. They're not agreeing. You're gonna wait till they change their mind to agree. What you need to do is change the constitution to force them to agree. To put some. The last people said, "Oh, did we put it like that because we thought they could come to a consensus?" Really? Really? Guyana, you had all this history. Indeed, what forced the constitutional reform of 2020, the 2000s was right on the street. Now you are telling me that you wanted consensus, and you said these people who are just beating people one another up on the street really gonna come together on an important issue like the judiciary. You see what's happening in America over membership of the judiciary, and you think that, well, then you don't know politics. But even if, all right, you heard everybody, and there's a part in the Constitution, I think the opening paragraphs that says, look, we are not going to see everything and all that. Therefore, we uh, for the Guyanese people to make changes, and then you end up with some constitutional reform committee and all of that. But the very nature of the system should have, it's not happening because of the nature, the ethnic nature of the system. Everybody wants to hold on to keep, and it's a very dangerous thing. Effectively, what they are doing, anytime you go to the courts, the judiciary is not really independent. The judiciary can't be independent because the judiciary can get moved, knock off anything. One of the most important things for judiciary being independent is settlement in office, that it is certainty of office, retirement age, and all of these things. You don't have that. You don't have that certainty when you go, if you go at political issues, oh gosh. Before the issue even start, people are saying the judiciary gone haywire. So effectively, you have a major, major problem there. The GCOM is like that. The Aubrey said, "Oh, well, really, what we should do is take away the vote from the chairman and essentially allow consensus to arrive with the two groups, because if you take away the voting right of the chairman, is the two groups got to come to some kind of consensus. Well, I've not thought about it long now, but I'm certain that what you have now is not working. If somebody able to capture the chairmanship, which they could, and they can do, the chairman becomes the commission. The chairman can just sit down and say, I'm listening to both of you, right? I'm making a decision. How come that can never be a good, decent show? The truth is that you need consensus, but you got to sit down and put in place a system that would allow for consensus. Now, is that possible in this winner take all context? We go right back where we come from. Because nobody, no matter how many, as I said in my article, it doesn't matter. You'll have to have a leap year of prayers and fasting. And before the PNC or the PPP give up the chairmanship of that to the other side. So effectively, GCOM will not, they won't come to any agreement on the way forward. And GCOM cannot operate as it should with the current system. We go right back to the winner take all system. Until you deal with that, you can't properly deal with GCOM.
Come. GHK, we're not hearing you.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think we are going downwards here. We went from 3 out of 10 with the list.
Yes.
And the list goes to the polls, whatever is finalized. And then the polls go before GCOM, ultimately.
Yes.
So we went from 3 out of 10 having confidence in it to now 2 out of 10.
2 out of 10.
15%. So soon we'll be at 0, 1 out of 10, and 0 negligible. And so you look at our electoral system, registration, list, what goes into that, where we are with that in terms of our beliefs, our trust in it. And now we come to GCOM, where there's this body that is there, like some Delphic oracle, but it's not. And 2 out of 10 Guyanese at this late hour in the game, and it's not a game, is saying to these people, the International Republican Institute, hey, we got a real bad problem here. Well, I mean, I think even that is an understatement. Because, again, I go to something that has been making the news recently, and perhaps this is for another discussion some other time. The judiciary, when there's a stalemate, there's a deadlock or a problem or a crisis in GCOM, it ends up in the judiciary. So here it is, we have the State Department Human Rights Report for 2021 saying there is the perception, and I quote, there is the perception of widespread corruption at all levels and all agencies of government, including the police and the judiciary. So, fellow Guyanese, if we ain't got confidence in the independence of the judiciary, the neutrality of the judiciary, the truth of the judiciary, the integrity of the judiciary, then what do we have? What do we have for an electoral process? What do we have for a country? What do we have for a country here? That's all I'm putting it before. We can talk forever about reform. And look, the people who put together reforms, who end up controlling the reform process, are the people who know how to set loopholes into it. Those time bombs, those mines that blow up in our face later when we are going through parsing through phrases and clauses and provisions interpreted this and that way to Sunday. So we have got a problem with how we put governments in power. And unless we were to be resolved to do something, be determined to do something across the board, we are going nowhere but having these kinds of conversations, having people listen and agree and listen and disagree, and finding ourselves in the same place.
Columnist, commentator, Henry Jeffrey, commentator, political scientist. GHK referred there to the U.S. State Department Human Rights Report, which on Guyana, which just came out, and I started to read it last night. And I will bring back this panel next week to discuss that report. Very damning report, as GHK says there on corruption. But equally damning is the whole question of extrajudicial killings.
Yes.
And so I'll bring back the panel next week to go
Yes, sir.
through that human rights report. And here, audience, why we have to go through these reports and these polls. The first reason is because there are others who don't want to go through it. And Henry Jeffrey, at the beginning of the show, laid out the reasons why it's not their interest. They're not there. Once it has to do with who governs, they don't want to go there. So because they don't want to go there, we are going to go there. We are going to make you aware about what the real deal is. As we are saying, the PPP don't like this poll. They don't like the poll because the poll is painting a different reality from the one that they are trying to push down our throats. And so therefore, they are going to want to dismiss it, of it down, and so on. And we are going to discuss it because we want you to get what the real picture is. To what degree can legislative reform successfully address weaknesses in the current electoral system? Remember, the PPP is drawing up all kinds of laws. Remember, they talk about they're going to put penalties, jail people, and so on and so forth. Well, they're asking people to what extent those things can successfully address the weaknesses in the current system. Only 30% of people say that they can successfully address. 70% are saying that legislative thing that you're all running there with, that is not going to address the weaknesses of the current electoral system. Again, something that the PPP doesn't want to hear, Henry Jeffrey?
Well, remember how I ended just now. I said until you deal with the political system, trying to deal with the electoral system is almost impossible because everybody wants to win. The first thing political parties do if they want to manipulate election is to control GCOM. The Guyana, you try to control the electoral management system. First thing, go anywhere in the world. That the ones who want to manipulate elections want to control that system. Since we have been in that process for the longest while, they've always, from Bullers right down, we've always have this quarrel about who controls GCOM. Nobody, the people don't want to sit down and discuss a way to how we can manage this thing in an equitable way because nobody wants to be equitable. Everybody looking for their own advantage and they want to win and take all. So effectively, as I ended like this, I'm going to end here again because I don't think there's much more to say around this process. Unless you change the political system, the 60-something% that believes, you can perhaps do something going to be very disappointed.
GHK? Anything more to say there?
We hear about legislation. You can't legislate. We are legislating ourselves to death in just about every corner of this society and every aspect of it. In the prison system, in our system of punishment globally, we have moved away from vengeance, from retribution to rehabilitation. So I think maybe a paragraph, not necessarily a page, from that kind of thinking needs to infiltrate our our lawmakers, our political leaders, and to infuse in them that, listen, we got a process here that perhaps it needs rehabilitation before you can get to some kind of reform area. You need to give it some medicine, and as bitter as it is, let's take this analogy a little further. As bitter it is, we've got to chew on it and swallow it, and then let it take us to that process where we could go in the gym, where we could reform ourselves and get on a treadmill, not a treadmill to nowhere, where we could lift little weights. We could bite off the bigger pieces, which reform represents. Rehabilitate ourselves, change our mentality. I don't want to talk about Bob Marley and emancipate your mind and all them kind of thing. But those simple phrases, in those lyrics, you got a little answer for where we there. And I mean, how much more can you say about this? Well, everything we somewhere along the line, somebody got to interpret those laws. Somebody's got to read those papers in those documents and say, well, what does this thing mean here? How do I apply it in my wisdom and my intellect? How, given the context of that, and judges don't live in isolation, they don't live on some island or some planet that is alienated from us. They, they know what they read the papers. They understand the temperature of the environment. And it ain't got nothing to do with climate change. It's about the political saturation that pervades this country. And so they feel it too. They're humans. And so they said, look, we got this thing here, and this is what the law says, and the new legislation says, and therefore we must apply it. At the end of the day, you just have all this. Some group of people, a major group of people, is going to be unhappy. Somebody can come out and not row about a poll result. They can row about the result from GCOM, right? That you're looking for, when you jail the people, where you got it? What you have now, you have an outcome that the people who walk away with that clap themselves on the back, and the people who left pressed with their nose against the window pane saying, but really what happened to us is the same place we there. And that is where this so-called legislation and legislative effect and drive and vision and thrust takes us. We've got to have the honesty, the decency, the integrity. And this is not the moralist talking, Dr. Jeffrey. This is a practical man. Say, sit down and put it and say, what we got in working. What we have here is not working, gents, brothers and sisters. Let us figure out a way. You give up something, I give up something, and all of we get something. And that, I think, is much more beneficial, long-lasting, durable than ramming laws down people's throat.
People throat. Yes. GHK Lal, Henry Jeffrey here tonight. We are going through the IRI poll. In case you're just joining us, welcome to Politics 101. Those of you who've been here from the beginning of the program, keep the faith. As we said over and over again, we are going to be discussing the things that they don't want to discuss. This one gets plenty teeth. In your opinion, do the declared official election results reflect the will of the people? Let me read the question again. In your opinion, do the declared official election results reflect the will of the people? All Guyanese, only 22% said yes. 78% said no. Let's go now to the ethnicities. African people, 16% say yes, 84% no. East Indians, 28% say yes, 72% say no. Indigenous people, 21% say yes, 79% say no. Mixed people, 20% say yes, 80% say no. So the ethnic responses, in a sense, in every sense, approximate the national responses. Now, you assume that Black people, they lose. So you assume that, all right, they will say, we don't have confidence in the results. But Indians, 28% said they don't have confidence in the declared official results. 78% therefore saying we ain't got confidence in the result when you declared it and that put you in government. You understand why Gail Teixeira and the PPP don't want this poll to be discussed? Yes, you take the first bite at this.
No wonder the lady rowing. They give you a basket for fetch water for bait duck, right? You got to go there, madam, and say something for knock this thing down, right? And she tried. We gotta give she a little credit. She tried. But the best you can do in those circumstances is to come out with both guns blazing and say this thing can't stand. This thing holds no water. This thing should be disrespected, dismissed, and disdained for all that it is worth. And that is what you get from Gail Teixeira. Because again, look at the numbers. I mean, it's not 38%. It's now 48%. It is 78% says, look, almost all the black people say here, we ain't like the thing. We don't agree with the thing. And now, very close behind, what's the difference between 84 and 78%, folks? 84 and 78% is almost on par, where the major groups are saying, this, well, I can't call say or swear, this thing in whole no water, this thing here. But here we are living in a system of governance, and the results of that election, the will of the people, the so-called will of the people, with this result. And you know, we talk about democracy and free and fair. I wonder if free and fair gone now, right?
There you go.
Given the fact that this 1,500 people, how much responded, and 78% of the 20% that responded, etc., etc., you break that down, you have the great majority of people saying, man, don't make a fool out of me. This thing wrong, right? And that is exactly what we are hearing. Like you've been saying at least 2 times on this program tonight, is that we could understand black Guyanese saying, look, I don't want to hear nothing about the thing. That thing was wrong from day one, and get out of my face. I could understand that. But when the shoe's on the other foot, and the Indians are saying, well, you know, it really, I got some problems there with this thing, and 78% of them say that, then we really in trouble. We really in trouble with talk. So let's look again at the progression that I talked about. The lists, the polls, the people who count in the votes, the outcome of that count, and now the people who make up this count for the IRI poll and saying, well. So from beginning to end, and to this day, we are living with this nightmare that we are living in this surreal world. We are living in this world that it's straight out of Dr. Frankenstein's laboratory. It's a political one, right? Whatever concoctions have gone in here, we live in with the result here where 78 and 84% respectively, Indians and Afro-Guyanese, are saying, so we're talking about reform. We got to start over. We have to start over from scratch. From scratch, folks. We have to start over from scratch and say all the mistakes we've made along the way, we've got now to really band our bellies, gird our waist, and put our minds to this thing to get some meeting of the minds on how we go. We can't repeat these things over and over. We don't have much opportunity left with oil here to repeat the same errors of before, because it's going to blow up in our face in the worst way possible. When people on both sides, one side, the winning side, say, well, I really got nothing for hold on for you know. And the losing side saying, well, you see what I tell you all along? So you've got all kinds of embers glowing there. And they're not glowing with a white light. It's a different kind of light. It's a wicked light, right? And it ain't good for this country. That's me.
That's GHK Lal. Your Guyanese ended on here, you know. Alison Pearson, no. GT Root Girl, no. Diane, here with my phone hat. Not at all. Well, it's true. That's what the numbers telling me here, girls. The numbers telling me here that less than 3%, less than 3 out of 10 Indian Guyanese are saying that the declared results ain't true. Henry Jeffrey, when you were doing political science in undergraduate and graduate school, I know they used to do political sociology back in those days. Explain this thing to us, man. As CHK said, we can understand black people saying, no, we don't believe what you all say.
David, why are you so surprised? I wasn't surprised. The level of manipulations going on in this electoral process, a whole lot of people involved. And when they sit down at the rum shop, they'll say it's true, you know. You can't say no, but it's the way they do on both sides. And I am sitting down at this Sunday before elections are Monday, not the day before, it's Sunday. I am sitting down at a drinking place in GT, and a lady, a party person bag fall down. And if you see how much cards she got, the ID cards, I just on the other side. Me want no. I want no. But this is not one and two people doing this crap. So all these people know, and they'll sit down and say, oh, yeah, but you can't, yeah, when then with one another area, yeah. And so when other people come now and they think look official and so on, and they come, particularly if they look foreign and so on, you know, you are thinking twice before you tell them stupid. And they're coming from America, and next thing you know, you lose your visa or something. And the result is that they tell them the truth, what they want to hear. You know, that is it. So I don't find this particularly surprising. I mean, everybody knows this is what's happening. They're just saying what they believe, and most people don't believe the system. The PPP might stay in government area, and we are ruling. Imagine they can have to go to want the same list, want to sit down and spend all the resources we are getting when nobody particularly accepts that they are a legitimate government. I'm sorry for my friend Gail. She should have stopped this thing from day one. The minute it wasn't a question of going to the poll and it's gonna be all right. She got to come into some serious licks. When she went back after the meeting, she should have said, look, this thing mightn't go well. After she gauged it, the likelihood this thing going well with the questions they're about to ask, listen, this thing mightn't go well. And therefore, I am advising you don't have to do it whatsoever if you're scared of the Americans or whatsoever. You don't have to do it. But I am saying this thing can turn. This thing can spin against our positions. But I hope she did that, then she all right, more or less. But if she didn't, then she went back and said, oh, yes, I have it covered. You know what's going to happen. She must be coming in for some serious heat. Serious heat with this kind of thing. So, but it's what the people, you say socially, the people essentially, it's too many. I've said this all the time too many people are involved on all the parties for them to get away with this thing. People know. People meet me in a shop and such. You know, so people know. So that's why you have this kind of result of what goes on.
Yeah.
In a curious way, this kind of result might even exaggerate the position of it, but that's what happens when you
Yeah,
come
yeah.
down to this thing.
No, Henry, what you said is so true. I mean, it's people got to do this skullduggery. On election day, one of the runners there on the East Coast where I was working called to the office and said them men sharing out ID card and they're going at a certain polling booth in the school to do the thing. So they sent me. When I show up, the vehicle where they were sharing out the ID card, I passed, speed off of going. So I went into the school as I'm going into the school. An Indian lady, then she gets it up and she porch and she pointing to me and showing me his witch and the polling booth. Of course, she said, behind them, go behind them with the ID card. And I went in there. The APNU AFC little girl that we put on she phone. People using the ID and she on the phone when I go in. She said, I said, well, girl, you know what's going on there? Why you on call? He said, I ain't got minutes to call.
Yeah, but when it's too many people involved for you to hide it. This guy is not camouflage. Too many people involved.
Well, there are two other things involved in understanding this country. People like talk and election and know. So
Exactly.
when so many people are involved, dying and stay underground for a long time. And I think I heard earlier the psychology of the Guyanese voter. He's looking at a white man coming and asking questions, hard
That
questions.
too.
Exactly.
I better don't take charge. He got connection to Juke Street.
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
And before the
Exactly.
next thing you know, they knock me down, right? So let me tell them the truth.
Oh, this one shouldn't be a big surprise, but we got to address it. How likely or unlikely are ordinary people able to influence decisions made in our country? 17% say yes, 83% say no. Any comments there?
Well, what is there to comment about? Essentially, you do have, if you have the results we just showing you there, it shows that people vote and mean nothing, and therefore the party elite, the oligarch can do what they like. When you think you are helping a party, when you think you are helping your group, you are helping the rulers of that group. Essentially, you are cutting out yourself altogether. Your vote don't mean anything because you are helping them to manipulate a system, and it's the oligarchs that rule. It's the couple of them that sit down there at that rule, and they have taken away your right, your fundamental right as a human being to determine the political system in where you live. You think you are doing this so that black people gonna be in power or Indian people gonna be in power? It's no Indian people and no black people. A whole lot of people poor and struggling out there. It's the oligarchs in this party determine what will happen where and what will happen there. Determine how much money local government can get. If you can get local government in the first place, because even if they put up something about local government, you go in and support them, you are going to support them to take away your own rights. So effectively, you're powerless, and this feeling must come over. This feeling must come over to you, boss. As the thing say, these people do what they want. We ain't really got no power in the system. Look how long the Constitution give people right to have a pattern and leave this country, me believe, saying, oh my Lord, the PPP will not allow the people themselves to have direct parliamentary representatives in the area. He left it, and when you turn to the other side, they were there. They do anything? No, because it suits them. It suits these people, and it's the oligarch, it's that group that's up there that gonna get. Even if they mean well, what how they're trying to do cannot augur well for you. Is you going through the pressure down there? Is you your neighbor don't like? Is look at the part when they start talking about discrimination at the end of the week thing there. More Indian feels that they felt that people are discriminating against them than Africans on election. The result is because if you Africans, I believe, are largely defensive racist. If you don't like me, I don't like you. And I mean, it's kind of be worse because it's everybody they're putting in the basket and can behave in that kind of way. It's not superiority racism, so I'm better than you and nothing like that. It's a defensive racism for the most part. And if you got both parties doing the way you think gonna happen, if you got a situation of ethnic conflict, you're gonna feel that you are being harassed by the other side, and they're gonna feel that they're being harassed by you. So, my dear friend, that's my take about what's going on there.
GHK?
Let me get the one off the table right away. Ordinary people ain't got nothing to say or to influence what power in this country. And interesting that Dr. Jeffrey mentions repeatedly the word oligarchy, because today's Kaichur News Peeping Tom spoke about the old and the new. And he talked about the oligarchy. And because we've been talking about numbers here for the past 2 weeks, let me tell you some numbers that I have come up with. And I've been calling this oligarchy the less than 1% people, meaning the less than 1% society we have in this country. The people who are close to the seat of power, the people who make the chair that is the seat of power, the people who prop up the chair that is the seat of power, meaning this government or that. And here is this: the less than 1% is less than 1% of 1%. I hope I make this too complicated. 1% of 750,000 people is 7,500 people. 1% of that, take away them 2 zeros, right? Is 75 people. You got 75 magnates, tycoons, lords, commercial lords, captains of industry, commerce, you call them whatever you want. Good money, bad money. I've been talking about that tonight, right? Here's the story. Money means, translates to power. Wall Street money, where I come from, same thing in America. But you got some systems in place here. You got 200 years plus. Here, we still trying to find ourselves to determine whether we free or whether we still in, got a master somewhere. Well, I know that we have one. My position is that we have one. We have two of them, one in Washington and the other one in Texas. All right. So here's the story: the ordinary people in this country, they count. They count as voting fodder. They count as electoral fodder. Go there, turn up, vote for keep the other man out of there. Right now, that's the raw reality. Is this oligarchy, this less than 1% of this population that calls the shots here through money that buys a lot of things, whether it's television space, whether it's newspaper space, whether it's candidates, whether it's the messages and the transportation and the logistics, and whether it's to get people to go and vote or to get people not to be there to count the votes, to watchman the votes when they're getting counted in the polling stations. That money, we heard some of that on the East Coast and elsewhere. And I tell some PNC people, I say, man, that's your problem. That is not the other side problem. You people, if you can't manage your people and you don't get the right people, something wrong there, right? But again, let's move along. I'm saying the money make these things possible. The again, the messages that you put out there and you saturate the airwaves, every channel with that, you are going to brainwash some people. Look, the honorable member of parliament started with our party's reaction to this poll. They're going to keep the up, they're going to beat the drum and blow the trumpet. And some people can say, you know what, maybe we spoke out of turn. And you know, them white people are a little tricky. Them foreigners, look what they do. And suddenly they're going to find problems in the aisle. But the thing about it is that when messages are pounded into people over and over, after a while they come to believe it. And then you give them the little incentive for the con. And these guys could afford it. The oligarchy can afford it. So let's cut out this nonsense right away about ordinary people making contributing or being contributory factors to the power in this country, the governance in this country. Get the one off the table.
Yeah. THK Lal, Henry Jeffrey. Oh, tonight we are really digging in deep into this IRI poll. Good night to all of you who have joined us. Mr. Norman Brown out of England. We get to the solutions, brother. We got to dissect the thing first, and then we'll get to the solutions. Now, Henry, Jeffrey mentioned this one, which I found quite interesting, you know, and he gave his take on it. GHK, I want to hear your take on it. In the past 12 months, have you personally felt discriminated against in your country on the basis of one or more of the following grounds? By discrimination, we mean when somebody's treated less favorably than others because of a specific personal feature. And 33% of Africans said yes, they felt discrimination based on ethnicity. 41% of East Indians said yes, they felt discriminated based on ethnicity. 8% of indigenous people and 19% of mixed people. GHK, what do you make of that?
Well, I'm trying to put my arms around that, but let me say something on the discrimination side, and it's not necessarily appearance, it's just because of the stances that I have taken, the things I've written, the things I've said, but mainly written. The agents of this government, most likely in my mind, acting at the behest or what they think will please their leaders, targeted me for a major smear. You know, once those bells are rung, they can't be unrung, right? The cybercrimes people told me, "Mom, you won't take them things seriously." I said, "What the hell you mean by that? What do you mean by that? How should I not take this thing?" So have I been discriminated because of my public political postures, because of my political stances, my political beliefs? I would say definitely yes. And I can understand the part about the Indians, to get to your question specifically, that one I'm asking myself whether they felt they should have gotten more because their people are in power and agreeing that we voted strictly down the line with few exceptions along ethnic lines, Indians for the PVP and Afro-Guyanese for the PNC. So for Indians, 41% of Indians to say, "Hey, listen, I think I've been discriminated," because the only thing I can interpret that, let's get this straight. Black people in the public service ain't got no power. You get that straight. And even if they had, they're gonna frighten for really go after Indian
Yes.
people. So let me face reality. So they're being discriminated against. They must say, you know what? I should have get more, or I should have get this thing, or I should have got my foot in the door. And our children should have get a job that was promised them, or I should have get wherever it is. So that is what you are hearing there in that 41%. Again, we make some allowances for skew and error and all of that. But people are unhappy. The bottom line is this, that people are unhappy in this country, and it cuts across the races. It goes back to that oligarchic construct, that you've got some people who are really in the driver's seat, suckling at the trough, at the public trough. Anything they want, they can get, no matter how much it costs, how much it means for other people, they will get that. So that means somebody ain't getting. That means when one of them get a big piece, a whole set of little people ain't getting a little piece, right? So therefore, that's this agreement. That is the disenchantment. That is the disappointment and the despair that you're hearing in that 41% of Indians, give or take whatever deviation there may be. African Guyanese, I expect that, because most likely we'll talk about that next week, God willing. But the fact is, I know of people who have come to me and said, look, this is what happened to me. And it's only happened to me because I'm black. Of course, they don't want to hear the one at all. They ain't want to hear the one at all. But it's happening, and it's happening too much. And I'm looking to see how long more this will continue to go on. Indians, 41%, somebody can get something. Black people, well, they didn't get nothing at all. Right?
Right.
Good.
To what extent do you think citizens' basic rights are protected by our political system? All Guyanese, or all those who were polled, 8%, which means 92% feel that our basic rights are not. So it's gone down to one now, Gabriel. To what extent do you think citizens' basic rights are protected by the political system? 8% of all polled said yes. Africans, 7%. East Indians, 11%. Indigenous people, 9%. Mixed people, 5%. Henry Jeffrey.
You know, there's one, look, if just to take those numbers and what you can say, the political system in Ghana is broken. The system is there to do just that, to protect people's rights. And when you got that kind of numbers, what do you think you have? The system is broken. It got to be fixed. You got to fix the system. You can't walk around with little plasters and put it here. You can't go and say, oh, let me talk about the electoral system. The problems with the electoral system is a symptom of that broken system. Nobody got any faith. Not even the thing that the political system is supposed to do. It is its paramount obligation. Protect your human and other rights. Nobody believes it does it. And we have been at this for how long? We can't blame the British. We've been at this since 1964, 66. What we are like. And that is what is going on here today. The question is, how is this all going to change? And I reckon we're going to have to talk about that next week. Because these things, nowhere I know, maybe somebody can show me an example where these things have just changed because people said, the thing ain't working, let me change. At every place, this system has changed, even in Switzerland. At every place, this thing has changed. It had to be a political struggle.
Well, before I go to GHK, 60% of the people, when they ask them if they believe in democracy, 60% say yes. 40% say they don't believe that democracy is going to change anything. And I assume by democracy is the status quo, and they're talking about majoritarian democracy. GHK, low number, almost nobody feels that their basic rights are protected by the system.
Well, if you notice now, we're gone in the 90% range.
There you go.
11%, 7% for, 11% for, 8% for, or something. So that means 90% of the people saying here, the basic rights are being trampled upon, or they are being abrogated in some form, they are being infringed upon in some form or the other. You talk too hard, people even don't want to talk on the phone. They got some people in trust WhatsApp. You know, they're encrypted from end to end business. They must be saying, hey, no, don't try with the one for me. We can talk, but we can talk up to a point. Regular landline telephone, people frightened, they're looking over the shoulder. You ever notice when you talk to a man on a landline, the voice is drop?
Yes.
Why voice dropping? Because he believed he could evade some eavesdropping system that's somewhere out there, right? I mean, look, this is real stuff. So there is your basic rights being right in front of you in black and white or color. You pick a choice. And this thing, basic right. You talk too hard in this place, guess what? If you are a pro-government guy, nothing can happen to you. You're a supposed opposition supporter, loyalist, whatever they categorize you as, the police come at your door and knock, whether it's in the middle of the night or in the middle of the day. You talk too rough, or you spoke what is interpreted to be a little bit politically incorrect and malicious and maligning and all of that, and you get a slander or libel suit. I mean, the courts have been weaponized. And so basic rights are, look, man, democracy must be able to talk freely. If I am speaking and I talk in pure lie, you ain't got nothing for fear. If I talk in such a sophisticated manner, would you remember me? The people didn't understand me. There's me story there. So why is it that everything you believe that you have to respond to? Why is it me being whomever? Why is it that you feel you got to defend everything? If I'm standing in good stead, I have good standing, I have the utter confidence that whatever I say will prevail. So therefore, me have to defend nothing. I'd be a little Bornamite about it, or whoever, or Churchill. But the fact of the matter, basic rights in this country, people are uncertain about it, and they made that, and they made sure that the people in the IRI hear that 90% saying, listen, the rights are under some trouble under CJ.
There you go. Tomorrow night, I'm going to have the trade union people to come on and talk. The role of the trade union, we come into Labor Day, May Day next week, or this weekend. The role of the trade union in the present situation in Guyana. What is the role of the trade union in an authoritarian system? That's tomorrow night. We're going to have some of the trade union people on Lincoln Lewis and I think Norris Witt and Takumo Gunse and others who are going to come on to talk about that. We've come to that time where we've got to say tata. I want to thank you, Henry, and thank you, GHK, for coming on again and walking us through this IRI poll. A lot of people are somewhat surprised at the findings. We're going to try to publish the poll on our website where you can go and go through it. But I'll give you notice when it's up there. And thank you, Henry. Thank you, GHK. Next week, we're going to be discussing the State Department report on basic human rights and corruption. Have you seen the State Department report yet?
No.
I'll have to forward it to you.
Okay.
GHK, I know you were reading it.
I have
it. Right. If you can forward it to Henry, I'll be glad. But I'll also forward it. Okay. Thank you all very much again, brothers, for coming on.
All right.
See you all next week. And to the audience, you've been so lovely. You've been such a lovely audience. I love you all, and we're going to continue this journey because the things that they don't want us to talk about, we're going to talk about. They say on these programs we like to make trouble. Well, you know, John Lewis said good trouble is not bad trouble, and we're going to continue to make some good trouble. Thank you all. Tomorrow night, the role of the trade union in a dictatorship. We're going to have some sparks tomorrow night. Join us then. Good night. Goodbye.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.